Good evening. Welcome to The Race. I'm Chance Seals in Washington.
And I'm Joe St. George. Voters in Pennsylvania went to the polls for their state's primary elections yesterday in what could be a preview of which way the Keystone State might swing come November. On the Democratic side, President Biden easily won his home state. No real shock there, despite the fact 7% of voters chose Dean Phillips. The Republican side, however, was a bit more contested. Former President Donald Trump won the primary. But get this, his former opponent, Nikki Haley, got more than 157,000 votes. That's roughly 16% of Republicans. In other words, roughly 1 in 5 GOP voters in the closed primary. There we go. Those are the numbers. Look at that, 157,000. And this race was over a month ago.
Let us discuss, because it was 16.6%. You could round that up to 17.
Yeah.
Scripps News political analyst Steve Schmidt is with us, founder of The Warning, a newsletter and podcast on Substack. Steve, are Haley voters basically the Bernie voters of 2024 in that they don't love their choices, they're going to speak out, but in the end, they're going to vote for their party nominee?
I believe that the overwhelming majority of those Haley voters are going to come around and vote for Donald Trump, but there is a percentage of them that will not. And in the end, this election, like the 2020 election, like the 2016 election, will become a game of small numbers playing out over a few states and a handful of counties. And the disposition and displacement of those voters across those states and those counties could well be determinative. With regard to President Biden, what you're seeing and we'll see more intensity around is a left-wing challenge. And it's an open question whether those are actual voters or not. But on the Trump side of the equation, you see a much bigger group of voters that are pulling down that lever for Haley. And so is there an opportunity, and this was borne out by an NBC News poll, to upset the conventional wisdom? That poll suggested that Robert Kennedy doesn't hurt Biden, he hurts Trump. So is there a harbor for that Haley voter to go that doesn't take them into the Democratic Party lines, into Joe Biden's camp, a way station to hang out? And that's going to be one of the really interesting dramas as we watch politics play out over these remaining 195 days.
Steve, you've ran campaigns at the highest of levels. Are you a bit surprised at all that former President Trump hasn't done more outreach to those Haley voters?
It's just not something that he does. Donald Trump does not meet people where they are. He expects them to meet him where he is. And that has been a central feature of his candidacy, of his presidency, of his resurgence right up to now.
Well, yeah, he did kind of say, like, some of the people who are against him or, just like somebody else, you're out of here. Let's talk about some of those numbers that I think you were mentioning, Steve. Bloomberg and Morning Consult, they dropped a new poll just today looking at battleground states. And Donald Trump is ahead in all of them except Michigan, which I found interesting because there's been all this talk and consternation within the Democratic Party. He has this fragile support among Muslims and Arabs in Michigan, but that's the one battleground where he's winning. What's that about?
Well, that is about Joe Biden's legacy as a senator, as a president, with working class union voters. They know in Michigan that they have a friend with President Biden. And you look at some of the achievements of the UAW, the audacity and the victories of President Sean Fain, again in Tennessee, breaking up really the right to work states' resistance to unionization in auto plants that goes back all the way to Lamar Alexander's first term as governor of Tennessee in the 1970s. But in Michigan, they know they have a stalwart friend. That was the epicenter of the auto strike. You have a popular Democratic governor. You have a extremist movement and an extremist legislature in Michigan that was rejected by the voters in favor of Democrats. And so all of those tides in Michigan are good for the president. But it's a cautionary note for Democrats out there who might be overly celebrating and measuring the curtains when they look at the trial. They mock Trump for falling asleep. I have done that. We've all laughed about it, but the fact is Donald Trump continues to lead from his sleeping position in the courtroom across those swing states in an accumulation of which, if the election were tomorrow, he would get to 270 electoral votes and take the presidency.
Yeah, and maybe we can pop up that poll one more time on the screen because, yes, Michigan was interesting, but I'm looking at that poll and saying it's ball game. I mean, that's not even a close election if Trump wins all of those red states on your screen. That's a blowout victory here. Are we in the middle of a Trump trial bump at all, perhaps, like we saw with he got a bump after the indictments? And then real quickly, Steve, third-party candidates, going to move any of these numbers?
Third-party candidates can move these numbers. You have a mix of interesting third-party candidates in this race. Robert Kennedy's at a level in some of these states where he could absolutely have an impact. What I would say about the Trump trial is that we really don't have an indication of the impact of the trial and Trump's comportment in it. A lot of the observations about him looking weak, him looking that like he is lacking agency, control, completely opposite to the brand. We just don't have an accumulation of enough time yet to get an indication for the impact on the polling of the actual trial. There's no question in my mind that the impact of the lead up to all of the accumulation of all of the indictments, all of the legal issues politically, that has helped Trump, that has cemented his base. But there is some indications now that there is a collapse of independent voters watching this trial, and that will be the place to look in that middle of the electorate if they're making a determination about Trump that it's time to cancel the show or not. And if that happens, that's very, very bad news for Trump, very, very good news for President Biden. There's still a lot of energy in the electorate in the private polling out there where there's a lot of voters who just don't accept the fact that the race is set, that the choice is fundamentally between Biden and Trump. They refuse to believe it. And this is important to remember. The most unifying political issue in the country over the last couple of months has been the overwhelming majority of Americans, which includes a lot of progressives, a lot of MAGA people that don't want and don't want to see the choice that's coming. And that choice, of course, is between primarily Trump and the incumbent president, Joe Biden.
Mm-hmm. Steve Schmidt, we always like to get your read of the polls and the trends out there. Thanks.
Appreciate the conversation. And as a reminder,